Nice to talk to you.
I'm glad you didn't give up. I had the I was trying to land the plane in the conversation before you, and you never know how conversations are going to go. So thanks for your patience.
Yeah. So should I just start talking about my
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about yourself. We've never met, to my knowledge.
Yes. So I'm Adam. I grew up in the South. That's where I live. And was raised by more or less Southern Baptist family, mostly by my grandparents. And but they weren't churchgoers. But they really instilled those values in me. And at the same time, my aunt was dating a Muslim man. So I was exposed to Islam at the same time as Christianity. And as a kid, to my mind, they were more or less, they seemed to be more or less two versions of the same thing. So religion, I was taken to church a few times when I was growing up, but religion to me seemed to be kind of a scary thing. Like it really, especially where I'm from, I would hear like Pentecostal preachers, and I would get scared by it, and the imagery scared me. And so I wasn't very spiritual as a kid. And I remember being 7 years old and basically coming to the realization, okay, someday I'm going to die. My consciousness is going to end. And just having an existential crisis at that age. And so I get a little bit older, and one of the things that I'm dealing with growing up is OCD. Really bad OCD, something I've always struggled with. And I have lots of religious thoughts associated with that. And I take medicine for it. I've been in therapy for it. And so it makes it hard for me to even consider anything religious. So now I get a little bit get on into my teenage years, get into adulthood, and I finally find something that sort of substitutes for that. When I get on YouTube and I find Stefan Molyneux, philosopher. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was really, he was almost like a pastor for me, in that he brought some kind of sanity to my life. Mm-hmm. So, and from there, I've started to get an interest in Christianity from philosophy, and that's really where I'm at the moment.
Okay. What is the relationship between Christianity and philosophy to you?
What I found, and it wasn't just with Molyneux, but several YouTubers, I found that there was a direct link between, and this is something else I was going to get into. I found this direct link that just blew my mind between the Greeks and how that evolved into Rome, and how that eventually evolved in the East to the Byzantine Empire and Orthodoxy. And they were like, this was another YouTube channel where I learned a lot of this from, which was this man named Dyer, who introduced me to Orthodoxy. And he was talking about, it just blew my mind, because I didn't learn about this stuff in school. I didn't learn that there was something besides Catholic and Protestant. And I discovered there's this whole group of people who sat and philosophized about this spiritual realm. The church fathers, I never even knew about church fathers. And there was this, a I started to realize there was this direct lineage from Greece all the way up until that empire fell, basically.
Yeah.
Just, yeah.
Interesting. So, I early, I mean, one of the first things that you said, so your parents were, let's call them unchurched Christians. So they didn't go to church, but they identified as Christians. I mean, that's not uncommon in the United States. And then your aunt was dating a Muslim man, and you kind of said, well, it's kind of the same thing. You know, one goes to a mosque, one goes to, and then of course Orthodoxy. And the part of what's interesting about Orthodoxy is that, you know, the West, and, you know, in terms of the Roman Catholic and then the Protestant, basically came to ascendancy in the world stage via the Age of Discovery and the colonial period, whereas the East, the church was devastated by the growth of Islam. And but it, you know, as you know, same for me, many of us who grew up in the West, who were familiar with Protestant and Catholic issues, were unfamiliar with Orthodoxy and some of their tradition and their heritage. So listening to Molyneux and J. Dyer, so it's of interest. Has it changed? Has it changed how you live your life?
I would say it made me, it really made me get deep into philosophy, and from that, I would say it changed my life.
Okay.
Made me have a clearer sense of who I am, a clearer sense of purpose. But it hasn't brought spirituality. It hasn't affected me spiritually.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Well, I've always had a hard time connecting with the idea of a personal God. I went from being basically, I mean, I basically didn't really even think much about God growing up. It's just something I didn't think about. And then after I started getting into philosophy, I became pretty much deist. That made the most sense to me, and that's where I'm at. And I was always confused about certain things in Christianity. So, like, I studied, when I talk about philosophy, I mean, there are certain things, like I studied Hinduism for a time, and it helped me understand what sin means, believe it or not, what sin in the Bible means. Because to me, when I was a kid, I was like, well, sin is just something arbitrary, it's something. And then I come to understand that sin is not just, it's not just something arbitrary. It's something that affects everything. It affects the world. It affects yourself. And Hinduism helped me understand that. So I guess when I say philosophy, I'm thinking more in terms of just not just secular, but all these different ways of viewing things.
I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, there's always this line between what we think and what we do. And the question is, if you're interested in J. Dyer, and, you know, Molyneux is, I haven't listened much to Molyneux. My impression was that he was a moralist, in that some of the videos that I heard him in, he would basically be admonishing people to live a certain way, stop doing some things that are self-destructive, start doing some things that were more productive. That was the gist of the little bits and pieces that I had heard of Molyneux. J. Dyer, my impression is that I've heard even less of him. My impression is that he's sort of an apologist for orthodoxy, in that he's sort of promoting it, and he's promoting it as the truth, and kind of orthodoxy over and against other perspectives, I would say. I don't know if that's fair, because again, I've just listened to bits and pieces of some of his videos. What do you think Jay Dyer's main agenda is?
Oh yeah, he's what drew me to the Orthodoxy was his approach, because he's very, very cerebral.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. He's definitely tried to promote Orthodoxy.
Have you visited, and I don't know where you live, but you don't have to say obviously here, but have you visited an Orthodox congregation at all, or looked for one?
I've considered it. I've looked for one near me.
Okay.
There is one. And
go ahead.
And for me, a lot of the appeal is mostly cerebral, because I've never been able, like I said, I've just never connected emotionally with spirituality. It's more of just an intellectual thing.
Yeah.
One thing I would say about Molyneux, though, is he was kind of unique, because he's an atheist, or I guess he still is. He seemed to be on the fence lately, but he wrote what he believes is the proof of secular ethics. He wrote a book about this, universally preferable behavior, and he's always been in a lot of controversy over that. And so he was really trying to promote healthy living in a secular context. And he found over time that almost all the people who attacked him for that were fellow atheists.
Yeah.
And that the Christians were supporting him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this gets into a lot of the videos that I've been doing lately on the work of Tom Holland, where I think historically so much of what we define and assume to be healthy is really the legacy of Christian influence through history in our culture. That the biblical stories have deeply formed our communal moral assumptions, and so what we consider to be healthy and productive, it's not self-conscious in us. We're not self-consciously connecting it with stories in the Bible or the teaching of Jesus. And I'm not surprised that the more Stefan Molyneux took a look at this stuff, that he comes to a similar understanding as Tom Holland, in terms of recognizing, this stuff can be related all the way. Certainly we get a lot from the Greeks, but it is the stories around Jesus and the framing of Jesus' story that creates all of these assumptions of health, and really deeply molds what we decide is true and good and right. And so I'm not surprised that Molyneux, as and if you look around the West and say, what is self-evident morality? if you come at that from outside the system and begin to look at it, people outside the system will look at it and say, that looks Christian to me, because that's what we've been immersed in and bathing in. But it's, you know, it's interesting to me. I mean, we all have 24 hours in a day, and we spend some of that time sleeping and eating and you know, whatever we need to do to make sure we can have a place to sleep and food to eat. But the, you know, at some point it's, and it's really interesting, at some point it's helpful to ask, okay, how do these ideas begin to take shape in the material and physical reality around us? Because especially for someone like Stefan Molyneux, I mean, again, I've only listened to 2 or 3 of his videos, and it was, and the ones that I heard were sort of like a call-in show. And I don't know why people continue to call in if they would listen to the show at all, because they'll call in and they'll say, well, I had a relationship, and then I had a baby with this person, and then I had a baby with that person, and then it's like, if you've watched Stefan Molyneux's gig and you've lived that life, do you really want to call in? And maybe you just want to participate in it. But I mean, the point of his efforts were to, there's this mental image of the good, and what steps do we need to take in order to not just look at that good and agree with it, but to say, I'd like my life to embody that good. And, you know, especially as someone who's dealt with OCD, I mean, part of you knows that it's a tremendous distraction and a tremendous, there's a lot of suffering in having relatively inconsequential aspects of your life dominate your thought world. I mean, that's basically what OCD is. And so it doesn't surprise me that part of it sounds like, and again, we're just talking here, and I don't know you at all, but it doesn't surprise me that you've been on a quest for stronger thoughts that can displace relatively trivial things that have been dominating your life.
Yes.
And so it doesn't surprise me that if you start working that system, and there's this Puritan divine that I can't think of his name right now, or even able to quote him, but the idea that he had was that if you have, and this is the way he talked about sin, if you have a sin in your life, and most of us have sins in our lives. So what is a sin? Sin is a behavior or something in our lives that, sort of like OCD, has taken up residence in us and is become an enormous distraction and a huge waste of time, because it is taken a disproportionately large section of our lives when really it should be down here. I mean, that's a way of translating sin and connecting it to obsessive compulsive disorder. Here you have, might be a fine thing in your life, but now suddenly, I mean, think about, you know, I deal with a fair amount of alcoholics. Think about alcohol. Alcohol it's just alcohol, and it's in wine, it's in beer. Beer is good, wine is good. These things have their place in the world, and in moderation. There's nothing wrong with a cold beer at the end of a hard day's work, or a nice glass of wine to share with someone with dinner. In fact, it's all throughout the Bible. Jesus turns water into wine. But if wine becomes the center of your life, well, or alcohol becomes the center of your life, well, now suddenly the rest of your life is out of order. And so this Puritan divine had basically the idea that the only way to manage something that has become too strong and taken up residence in too high a place of priority is you need something stronger to dislodge it. And so I think, again, I don't know you at all, but just listening to you, just the little snippets that you've told me, that I'm not surprised that you found some stronger things in your life that have probably improved your life, because to think about these better thoughts and better ideas, well, now some of these other littler thoughts can be littler, which is exactly where they should be. I don't know if any of that makes any sense.
Yes, and I think anyone who's been through, say, trauma growing up, which I went through some of that, I think trying to find something that's certain in your life is very important, and that's been a big motivator for me with the philosophy and the interest in movement. Definitely.
And I would think a next step. So one step is the idea of it and the mental representation. And this is very, I don't know, I assume you found my videos by watching, you probably went from Stefan Molyneux to Jordan Peterson to me. Is that how it went?
Probably. I mean, it's funny. See, Molyneux was just not long ago, he was banned from YouTube.
Yeah.
And so watching, you sort of replaced him as far as watching videos every day. I used to watch his videos every day, so now I watch yours.
Okay. Well, I hope I'm helpful.
Yeah, you are.
So I think, a next stage for you might be to ask questions of, okay, I found stronger, better thoughts that can take some of these other things that were dominating me and put them back where they belong. And now what kinds of things can I do in my life that can also do that for my physical actions that I do in my life? Because like I said, we all have 24 hours. If we were to sit and write down everything that I do, just kind of make a summary of it. Okay, I got up and I, went to the bathroom, and I sat on the sofa with my wife, and I checked my email, and I went to work, and I, if we were to sort of do what we did with our lives, analogous to doing what we're doing with our thoughts, our lives would improve, because the thinking is one area of life, but the doing is another. And that, I think, was part of the genius of what Jordan Peterson offered a lot of people, in that, even with his admonition to, clean your room. Well, what does, what difference does it make if my room is clean? If you can, and of course that could be very dangerous. That'd be hazardous if you've got some OCD in you. I know I have friends with OCD, and sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes they have the absolute worst rooms, the worst rooms in the world, because they're obsessing about keeping things, and other OCDs have the absolute cleanest room in the world because all they do is clean it. So I don't know, it's so funny the way we fixate on some things, and how those fixations can dominate our lives. So, but I'd encourage you to ask a question, say, okay, I found these thoughts and ideas to be really helpful in terms of cleaning my mental space. What actions can I do to improve the kinds of things I do in my life? I don't know what you do for work, or what your living situation is like, but and you didn't ask for advice, but just listening to you and thinking this through, that might be totally off base, not helpful at all. I don't know.
Well, I've been wanting to. I've been wanting to join a church, but I guess my problem is not being, well, the same kind of believer, at least at this point.
Yeah.
Because like the founding fathers of the United States, some of them had the same deism, but they were churchgoers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's something I would like to do. But I want to touch on the OCD thing, because that's been a big barrier with any religion for me, because that has caused me serious that has caused me a lot of mental turmoil.
Yeah.
Because you get intrusive thoughts that can just start to dominate your life.
Yep.
And so even though I've never been religious, I'm aware of all these things, and they start to take over my thinking. So like, say, I knew about the what Jesus says about blaspheming the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So what does OCD make you do? It makes you do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things like that. Just, and then when you're in therapy for OCD, they tell you that they train you to say that your thoughts alone can't affect anything.
Right.
That rituals can't affect anything.
Yeah.
Well, rituals are a part of any faith.
Yes.
And that's been a big issue with me.
Yeah. Oh, I can so understand both of those points, and those are great points. And it's so many of these truths. I mean, because so many of these, it was something like rituals can't affect anything. Well, in some ways that the therapist makes a real point. It's like, I have to, again, I have to keep checking the door lock. I have to keep, fixing the fringes on the carpet. All these things. A good friend of a number of good friends of mine are OCD or have some degree of that in their lives, and these rituals develop, but again, just like with the thoughts, there are better rituals and worse rituals, and if you have a strong propensity for ritual, then part of ritual management is find rituals that are healthier and better, and use those to push out the rituals that are insignificant and a waste of time. If I always have to, so I have a friend who, he's OCD, and if we go out to eat, he'll get in my car and there might be a piece of paper on the floor, and he'll say, "Oh, can I have that?" And the thing is, I know if he takes that piece of paper, it's going to go into his pocket, and then it's going to go into his room, and his room is just going to fill up with paper. And so I'll sort of lie to him, and I'll say, "No, I need that." "Oh, okay." And, we'll go out to eat, and, sometimes we'd go to fast food restaurants, and actually I stopped going there with him because that became a problem, because he wanted to keep the cup and keep the napkin and keep the wrapper. And it's almost anything that he would touch, he'd want to keep. And so then instead we started going to restaurants where they had plates and forks and knives and glasses, because he didn't have any, even though he touched all of those things, he didn't have any desire to take those things home. And, the social conventions meant that he had to leave the silverware in the restaurant. He couldn't take it home. So, so much of life are these little tricks and hacks of saying, all right, well, I'm only going to go to restaurants where they have plates and knives and forks, so I don't fill up my room with fast food containers. And so, no, and I can really understand. Just finding a church is a hard thing to do anyway, because churches are filled with people, and people are enormously dangerous. They are. They're terrifying. And they're wonderful, but they're enormously dangerous. And you start going to a church and you start getting involved and you start building relationships, and then something happens, and then there's issues and trauma and problems, and yeah, but
Yeah.
but at the same time, that's yeah. But I'm glad, thank you for listening to my videos. I appreciate it. You do me the honor of listening, of giving me your time, and it's not a small thing. So I appreciate that.
Well, your videos are really what I always kind of wanted the church service to be like.
Mm.
Growing up, I was like, I just like, they feel more like college lectures, and I like that. I'm the kind of person that really likes that sort of thing.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I believe that if you're listening to Jay Dyer and who else you're listening to on the YouTube. Well, and that's an amazing thing about YouTube, that here's all this material, and people are just putting it out there. And I didn't, until Jordan Peterson came along. Mostly YouTube for me was, these are silly little videos get shared on social media of, is this funny? Isn't this silly? Isn't this, cat videos? But then Jordan Peterson came along, and it's like, my goodness, I've, just listened to 2 hours of this guy. I've just listened to another 2 hours of this guy, and again and again and again and again. And I figured out, oh, I can listen to this in the car. I can listen to this while I'm doing dishes. I can listen to this while I'm, cutting grass in the yard. And it makes my chores much less boring, which is what chores are often. So no, it's really cool. That's really cool. So any, I don't know, often people have lists of any other kind of things you wanted to talk to me about, or
Gosh, that's really the gist of it.
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an honor to talk to you. It's funny you watch somebody and you feel like you know them, and then you actually meet them, and it's so weird.
It is. It really is. I had, so when
Yeah.
my most popular video on my channel is obviously my conversation with Jordan Peterson. And I had that exact same experience where here I'd listen to this guy. I felt like I know all kinds of things about him, but he doesn't know who I am at all, because, the videos just kind of go out there in the world, and they go where they will. And no, that's why I like doing meetups, and that's why I like doing these videos. And I haven't done a lot of these lately. It's I should make it a discipline of mine to keep doing these, because I really enjoy this, and it's really helpful for me to know to what degree who's listening to my videos, what they find helpful, because it's very meaningful to participate in making other people's lives better. It's a deeply meaningful thing. And so it's, well, I really appreciate it. I haven't put many slots out there, but you were one of the lucky lottery winners who grabbed it and was able to grab it. So good for you.
Yeah, and I know I've thrown a lot at you, talking. I've thrown a lot of like ideas at you, but it's I kind of thought, okay, I've got an hour. I'm going to try to make it count. So
good. Well, I'll send this. I don't know what you'd like me to do with this recording. I can send it back to you to have you look at it. I can destroy it. We can keep it between us, whatever you'd like.
Yeah, you can send it to me. Yeah.
All right, I'll send it to you. Well, I appreciate it, Adam. Unless you have anything else, I'm gonna call it a wrap. And again, thanks for watching my videos, and thanks for sharing your story with me.
It's an honor to talk to you.
Okay. Take care of yourself. Good luck with the OCD, and especially with the church stuff.
Okay, will do.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.